Hi, and welcome to Leading Dragons. I think we're it's the session number 4 with Casey Koshma. Hi, Casey. How are you?
Aloha, and how's everyone doing?
We're all good here, and I see that you're not in your garden today. You're
No,
indoors.
it's raining. 10 inches of rain so far and counting. So it's there's a river flowing in my backyard right now. If I were to do this where I normally do, I would be under a foot of water. So
Oh my God!
right
So,
now in the house
so it rains in Hawaii.
where I am, I'm in a tropical rainforest. We get 300 inches of rain a year where I live,
Wow.
up on the mountain. But that's why there's a 60-foot waterfall behind my house too.
Wow. I'd love to see a picture of that. I love waterfalls.
So,
It's beautiful, isn't it? So,
mhm.
yeah, Casey, we were talking about. So, where do we start? Where's this going to take us? This is the 4th session of leadership training during the Corona times, and I was just sharing with you during my morning walk today. I stopped and did a very short video clip on new beginnings. Spring is in the air, at least over here in Switzerland. I don't know if do you have spring in Hawaii?
Yes, we do. It's a light. We have winter. We have all 4 seasons. Winter is a little lighter than the rest of the world, but we still have winter. Um, and spring for us is wet, and summer isn't too hot either. We're a nice middle ground. We're tropical, but not too tropical.
Mm. I mean, so I was walking in this morning, and I was walking down to the lake, and then through the fields in the morning sun, the early morning sun, and it really felt like spring day. Also for Christians, it's Easter Monday, and
Hmm.
and I was like, well, what are new beginnings? New beginnings are a new leaf that's turned over, and it's about shedding the old and shedding everything that doesn't no longer serves us bit by bit. We don't have to do it all in one go. And so that short video clip that I just did, sort of impromptu video clip, was an invitation to everybody to say, perhaps pause and think, well, what is it? What is it that's not serving you? It could be a self-limiting belief, a fear. It could be other thoughts, other emotions, and also perhaps fear that's fed from the outside through other people. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Okay, let's talk about new beginnings. The truth is, we are at a point of history where changes are happening. And in terms of a forest analogy, some of the older trees are coming down, and that coming down creates opportunities for new growth. Now, step number one is we don't want to get ahead of what we think is needed to be done. We want to take advantage of opportunities as they arise. We don't want to go faster than what the opportunities bring us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We don't want to force solutions because you may go down the wrong direction. So the first truth is be patient, find the opportunities as they come up, and then start that new opportunity. Now, when you start a new opportunity, don't assume it's going to fill the niche in right away. In other words, if you're a sapling coming up in the forest, you can't take the weight of organization. You can't take the weight of expectations. So when you're starting these new solutions that get exposed, we don't want to go out to convince the world we have the solution. Because if that happens, they're going to pile on us and cover the sapling and drown it.
Mm-hmm.
We want, let the chaos be chaos. Let the problems be out there. We develop a solution and we give it time to get stronger. We give it time for people to go, hey, we like that growth. Let's help it along. That way, you can slowly build something. So that way, in a year or 2 years, or in the right amount of time, is strong enough to support itself, and then people can come and help it grow. So one of the lessons in new beginnings is don't get ahead of the growth process. Don't try to tell other people, here's my solution. You need to jump on because you actually will probably regret that choice. It will probably be too much with too little expectations. and it won't meet expectations, and then people will just walk away.
So
You want to grow into it.
this is what we were talking about just before I pressed the record button, which is
It was same
organic
thing.
growth.
Hmm.
So organic,
When I help students,
yeah.
yeah, when I help students start, it's helping them slowly, helping them with patience. Patience is wisdom. Helping them develop the network, helping them develop the marketing, helping them. If you have to try to do everything at once, even if you're expert, there's too much. You want to grow into the new. You don't want, after all, it is a new time. If you use old constructs, old ways of doing business, they're not going to match to the Gen Zers. It's not going to match to the millennials. And so again, you have to be willing to grow into this new system.
Mm.
And so patience, develop your core, develop your true audience, develop your supporters, develop your own confidence, develop your own, so you don't re-break yourself. And then with that patience, you can really hit your market. For myself, it took 16 years to build my business up because I was way ahead of the curve. If I tried to get ahead of the curve, I would have been out of business over a decade ago.
Mm.
The millennials are actually where my business is because waking up people to be in transformation, and the millennials are transforming.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to teach that millennial transformation to the boomers. It didn't work. I have a whole article about that because the boomers didn't want to hear about it. They didn't believe in change. They were trying to stay in the old system. So 20 years ago when I was doing it, it was too advanced.
So
Now it's actually almost behind the curve. Go
let's
ahead.
okay, yeah. So that this is fascinating. I love this stuff. So generate. So we're talking about generations now inside organizations and
Mm-hmm.
facing chaos, facing opportunity, and facing transformation. A choice or not, it is a choice. So the boomers are the Gen X's.
The boomers are actually basically they're 25 years out of their midlife transformation. The boomers are more like in the 60s and after now, quite
Yeah.
honestly. So if you're over 60, you're a boomer. The busters and Gen Xers are, we were beginning to break out of the system and we got, we're trying to say, no, this is not good, but we got pushed to the side. The millennials got cut off altogether because the boomers were afraid of the millennial power. But the millennials are coming up with new solutions.
Mm-hmm.
They have energy, they have vibrancies, they're going at it politically. They're really ready to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
The Gen Zers are just checking out. That's our children. So Deborah, you're my children are the Gen Zers. And they're like, yeah, we're out of here. We don't want anything to do with this at all. But the millennials are saying, no, we're going to make a new world.
And the
And
millennials
so
are
the
those
millennials are really powerful.
born, so those are the 30, 40-year-olds today, typically, roughly.
The millennials?
Yes.
The millennials are actually 25 to 40.
Okay, 25 to 40 years old. So they're
Mm-hmm.
coming into organizations. And so, I mean, this is a blessing for the older generations inside organizations because these are the ones, this is the talent that we need today and the creativity who are going to be able to take on the challenges and with their vibrant creativity and out of the box thinking. That's the last time I used that term, out of the box. It's so like
Yeah, I know.
what, how did that come out? And
That's your old corporate speak.
yeah, you see, there you go. Like, I'll just switch my hat again.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so they're the ones. And so, I guess the first question, and this is what we were saying, is what do leaders need to start ask? What kind of questions should they be asking themselves today with the millennials that they have, that they're already blessed with, and the ones that
Mm-hmm.
they want to bring into their organization?
So I'm going to share a story. I used to be an engineer at Boeing, and Boeing builds planes, of course. And because it's a boom bust industry, it meant that you get massive layoffs at a very regular cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Every 8 to 15 years, there would be a major layoff, and half the company would be decimated in a layoff. which created an interesting challenge because what happened in Boeing is you have the elders who had the institutional knowledge.
Mhm.
Then a layoff would come along and wipe out a whole generation from the company. Then the new generation would come in, begin learning the business. And so you had these gaps in age groups. And it created a real problem because it meant institutional knowledge was condensed down to a few people.
Mhm.
And because of the gaps, it created a problem of transmitting that knowledge to the next generation. And that caused a lot of problems. I'll give you a story. On the AWAC assembly line, that was a plane that was built for air surveillance. Okay. And so they built this plane successfully for years and years and years. And then they turned the line off because orders stopped. And then 10 years after the fact, they opened the line up again. So they bring all the equipment back out. They bring out all the plans back out to begin building the plane again. And something interesting happened. They couldn't build a plane. They had all the tools, they had all the instructions, and when they went to build the plane, they couldn't put them together. Nothing fit, nothing worked. And they were going, what in the world's going on? Well,
Mhm.
what happened is in that 10-year span, there was a layoff. And all the workers that used to work on the line either got laid off or retired. So they lost the institutional knowledge that kept things working.
Yeah.
So after a year of trying to build these things again, failing because they couldn't put it together, they finally said, fine, we're going to hire some of the people back in to see what's going on. So they hired back some of the engineers and some of the line workers in, and they went in, they walked around and they go, where's our marks? Where's everything? Because they're looking at all the tools and it's like, where's the markings? And they're like, what are you talking about? When we put these tools into storage, we power wash them all clean. And everyone's like, oh my God, you idiots. You washed away half the knowledge because we marked up the tool to make it work because they never worked. We had to mark the tool to re-engineer everything to make it work on the assembly line.
Wow.
And so they power washed away the institutional knowledge without even realizing it. And so they had to spend a lot of time to rejigger all the tools, relearn how to build this plane, which they built for years, but they lost the knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the lesson there is we have to be careful because the knowledge doesn't transmit cleanly through the generations. And we have to be careful to transmit power. We have to be careful to transmit information and respect. Because the millennials are going to do business in a very different way.
Mhm.
But they still have to fit into the infrastructure of the company. And a lot of that infrastructure gets power washed with these changes. And the times, the inflection of the times are going to change the way we do business. We have to keep some of the better rules of what used to be successful, but we also have to be willing to create new rules too. So the generational butting heads is going to be quite large in a lot of companies,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's going to be a lot of disruption in the knowledge base. And that's going to be a challenge to work with, quite honestly.
Mhm.
And working in Boeing, I saw that all the time, the disruption of the different generations.
So when
And
you
I think that's going to happen big time up ahead. Go
yes,
ahead.
so this is really interesting about knowledge transfer. So,
Mhm.
given where we are today, spring 2021, we're over a year into this pandemic, global pandemic, and it's
Mhm.
completely, uprooted so many systems and ways of working, organizations, products, processes, paradigms, right?
Mhm.
Now, so today, completely, probably a very naive question, how much of knowledge transfer is that important and that relevant for today, and particularly for the millennials who are going to be there to transform organizations?
It's a good question. So what I see happening working with businesses is several things. The business models are changing. And what it means is one, being smart enough to maintain old business models that work. Don't mess with what doesn't work. I mean, don't mess with something that's already working.
Yeah.
Keep that going. Even if it's going to be going away, keep it going long enough to create new business models along the way. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, there's going to be whole new lines of business opening up in your company. And
Yeah.
you don't want the two interfering with each other. Just because the old model works doesn't mean that's the same model for the new stuff. And as you said, Fujitsu is beginning to do this. They're actually they're opening up their internal business model for that new, saying you could create new business products under new rules and we're not going to mess with you. And they're creating these new projects in the company to expand out. And that's the right way to do it. Create these new projects. Don't impose the old models on them. Let them grow, because over time they're going to be grow strong enough to be able to release the old ones. So
Yeah.
you don't want to mix and match the models. It's actually part of the truth.
So, and this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, which is, we're talking about organic growth and start small. So let's keep what's working, even if we know that it's slowly sort of becoming obsolete. Let's keep it as long as possible, and then in parallel to that, let's start building new ways of new things, new products, new services, new processes, new ways, self-organizing. And indeed, going back to Fujitsu, they're creating micro enterprises inside, so pockets of micro enterprises inside this huge multinational. And I think it's fascinating stuff. So these pockets, where they have to self-organize, where they're completely free of any bureaucratic heaviness, monsters, and then at the same time, it's like, there you go, there's your little ship, go off, and good luck. And so the elderly, I mean, in inverted commas, the elders in the organization who are the they're the representatives of the institution, they have had to let go. They have had to shut up and let them get on.
It's really hard. I work behind the scenes in some big name companies, and you would think they would be able to do this split personality of old and new, and they can't. And these big name companies, they're creating these micro generational projects, and they're still putting too much of a burden on them by imposing the company's infrastructure or mentality upon these micro projects and destroying them. And it's really sad, because I'm working behind the scenes to keep people alive in these projects, the little death projects. They're being crushed. And on the surface, these supposedly innovative companies are saying, yes, we're behind all this, but they're caught up in the trap of doing business in the old way still. And the dragon leadership of these small micro projects are being decimated because they're not truly being allowed to be new. And you have to be able to bridge the two differences. And one of the things I do is I help teach these micro projects how to reconnect to the more macro old, so they don't get crushed. So you have to build communication too. And so it is a much more complicated process.
So we're like in this kind of what would you call it? Like it's a bit like a tunnel, and we got the old, and we've got the new, and
the colliding.
they're going to collide. Maybe it's not the right way of, but yeah. Where they need to overlap, and they need to kind of find a way to work together until transformation is absolutely complete. And for example, Fujitsu, because we're just using them as an example, are completely brand new company, or like completely transformed company. And I think, the word that comes to mind is a balancing act. It's a balancing act.
And we need like mentorships, we need connections, we need family / we're one organization come in. So when you create these micro, they have to be respected as much as the old projects. And you have to make sure they don't see, we're in times of survival. And when times of survival kick into gear, people fight for their bucket and they push out anyone else. And I'm seeing a lot of this with my students in these situations where they're being pushed out because other people are trying to survive, and they're not really thinking the bigger picture. They're thinking the smaller survival picture, and they're pushing out these other successful projects, ironically enough, in that process. So we have to push away to survival and make it about working together in community again.
But you see, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because we're not extinct. And the reason that we're not extinct, back in the troglodyte times, is because we somehow found a way collectively to survive. So
And what's happening?
what?
You're saying we found a way to collectively survive. If you look around the world, what's happening? The collective is being broken down,
Exactly. And this, but this is
and
what
that's a problem.
this is what Casey, exactly what I was coming to. So, and typically in organizations, as soon as a crisis hits, right? Departments. Let's say department, and a crisis hits. Um, what happens? So, for say budgets cut in half. A project deadline has been brought forward. Whatever it is, something tilts the balance, and now we're in crisis mode. And why is it that us humans, the first kind of like knee-jerk reaction is, right, okay, I'm going to go off into my corner. I can't speak to you till the end of the month, or I've got no time for you. We've got no time for these meetings. So people silo off when they should be doing the exact opposite, which is crisis time. You know, drop your pens. Let's all gather together in the room. Let's look at each other because we're all in the same boat, and let's figure out a way out. Why?
Right.
Why do we? I mean, I'm just going back to the human, our DNA. Why is it that we do that, and why is it so hard, particularly in times of stress, anxiety, and pressure? Why is it so hard to get collective and find a way to work together?
Profit, because it comes down to profit. It comes down to greed. It comes down to those individuals, say like us dragons, who actually want to work with each other and want to build something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Trouble is, a lot of people at the top are more individualistic. They're more about profit, and it's about bottom line. And so it makes more sense to focus on one small piece and push away everyone else. So you're cutting away your long-term growth for the sake of short-term survival.
Yeah.
There's a tree that lives on the island of Hawaii. It's called a koa. It makes really great guitars. It's a beautiful tree. It's got some really cool evolutionary tactics for surviving on the island in the middle of the nowhere. And what's interesting about the koa tree is, depending where it grows on the island, it's got 3 different forms. It doesn't have a standard tree form. It can look like a standard tree, and if it grows in the right environment, it looks like a shrub, where it grows multiple shrubs instead. And so it's got 3 different forms depending which environment it is in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the type of evolution as dragons we need to encourage, divergence in form, but we're still one forest. Trouble is, the old school part of the companies are saying we have to maintain this form. So when they see a new form beginning to arise, they cut it out, not recognizing it's still a koa, it's still them. So it's, again, learning to respect differences. And if you look around the world, diversity is being attacked. Racism is on the rise. Now, all these attacks. So so in survival, people are cutting away anything that seems different. Ironically, that's what we need, are the differences. So as dragons, who we promote those differences for strength, we have to be careful because we will be attacked for that.
Yeah, no, and I'm thinking of culture as well, and how as an organization, and as we move into um, finding new ways of working in order to survive and to grow with the times, um, we need to adapt the culture. We need to adapt the way that we are with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the less diversity that we have, as in diversity of thought, for example, diversity of perceptions. I'm just looking. I've got a huge mosquito that's sitting on my lamp, and it's about that big. First mosquito I've seen this year. Um, and yeah, and it goes back to culture, because it seems to be still such a yes, a kind of a wishy-washy kind of, I'm not quite sure what that's about, and let's bring some people in from the outside, and they'll figure out what culture we need to be putting in place, when that's obviously, I mean, by definition, that doesn't work anyway, right? Somebody from the outside coming in, telling, prescribing some kind of culture. So it's about growing. So going back to this tree, what did you call it?
It's a koa tree, Koa, koa.
Koa tree, right.
Mhm.
So the koa tree adapts its representation according to its environment. So we are having to adapt according to our environment, which is this
Mhm.
chaos, this upheaval of and this upheaval, this uprooting of the ways that we've been doing things. And so and it's just, I just think it's just fascinating. It's again going back to, okay, so a culture as well, and how is it that we want to lead moving forward.
And I think it comes down to something we said in an earlier Dragon Talk here. You're going to have to be smart to pick the company you're in. Some companies are going to focus on the old, and unless you are ready to only be the old, you want to leave that.
Mm.
And they'll succeed. Some of the old growth companies will survive hunkering down. There are going to be new companies that will be new growth. That's going to be exciting. They will get weeded out, but there's going to be a lot of potential there too. There are going to be some companies that try to do both. Over half of the companies that try to do both will fail because of the differences in culture, the differences in generation, and survival mode will push them apart. And so it's being smart to pick the ones that are able to blend the two together.
Mm-hmm.
Fujitsu is going to make it. They're a company that understands old growth. They bought out the Kodak film business and doing great with that because they saw an opportunity to maintain the old growth film industry going. There was not enough room for multiple of those companies to go. Kodak sold the business. Fujitsu did really well by buying that. They're cleaning up house on that choice of being old growth. But they're also a smart company. They have a diverse product line and they're seeing the need to create the new growth too. So they're willing to invest in it. But for every Fujitsu, there's going to be 100 companies that won't be able to do that. And for us as leading dragons, we have to be smart enough to not be fooled by the talk and look at the actions. And the companies that truly integrate the old and the new are the ones that we want to be part of. And the ones that silo off and don't talk and refuse to make that community, we want to leave that type of situation.
Mm.
And you can see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If the actions back their words, we can see that.
And this is what we were saying in a previous session, Casey, wasn't it? That
Mm-hmm.
if you notice inconsistency between what's being agreed verbally and actions, then you maybe need to think a second time about whether you want to be staying there or not.
And about a quarter of my students, I'm telling them to leave. And they're finding new jobs quite easily because it's still early enough in the process. Because that inconsistency you can spot, you leave it and you build new.
Mm.
Other students, I'm saying stay because it's better to stay in a particular silo for your protection. And so for each person, the choice is going to be dependent on what they need, how far they're going to push out into the new, how much risk they're willing to tolerate. All the rules are out the door. And instead of trying to find a cookbook to tell you what to do here, you're going to really have to start fresh and grow into it and be willing to fit in the appropriate place as a dragon leader.
So in all this transformation, one of the abilities that we can't, how should I say, we can't champion enough is the ability to let go of outcomes. As long as
Mm-hmm.
we are attached, even if in some shape or form attached to an outcome, we're not letting go. And if we're not letting go, we are not really embracing the opportunities that could be out there, and it could actually turn against us.
Good point. Let me talk about that point. Releasing outcomes and being willing to adapt. The turnaround time to release an older way of doing business and a newer way of business isn't in a week or two. We think faster than we can act. We
Mm.
think faster than we can evolve. Evolution is slower than our thought process. And so what's key as a leading dragon is if you're at a point in transition, don't try to transition too fast. Give yourself 2 years to go from an older style of business to a newer style of business. Give yourself the 2 years to resync, to redevelop new tools, to redevelop your core, to re-heal, to get stronger again. So once you begin going, you're in a better place. So one of the keys here as a leading dragon is A, are you in the older silo? Are you in one of these newer silos? Or are you going somewhere totally different? Decide where you're going to go. If you're staying in something old school, you don't need to change very much. And you could be one of the people there who is willing to communicate and create community, because we need bridges. So some of the leading dragons will need to be in the old silos in order to communicate with the new silos as they arise. That takes one type of personality. If you're releasing the old and going to new, give yourself the 2 years to transition. Give yourself the year time to connect to the newer generation. And if you're a millennial, give yourself time not to get crushed by the older generation. Build up your base.
Yeah, that's a complete transformation, that you're talking about, Casey, over 2 years. And it's that organic growth that we were talking about earlier. And that takes the time. It's not because you've thought it through that it's actually, and I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was talking about, I kind of described my own personal transformation as a cellular. It's like I've integrated it on a cellular level. So that's when it's not only up here, but it's here as well. It's in the heart. And this goes back to heart-led leadership, self-awareness, heart-led self-awareness, and the heart-led and human systems. So and it's interesting because today, we're talking about organizational transformation, and then we're talking about human systems. But in fact, one doesn't exclude the other. The human systems is how we're going to do it. And this is the what over here, which is the organizational transformation. And so when we talk about organizational transformation and design thinking, innovative solutions, I'm going to have to say it a second time, thinking outside the box. Okay, that's what we're going to do, but it's also the how we're going to do it. I guess it's, I don't know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, or do they come together? And is it through by being like this that we will find new ways or different ways, different options of organizational transformation?
And the answer is they happen together. Chicken and egg evolved together. And that's why we have to give ourselves 2 years to transform, to allow for evolution and new structures to get developed. And in all the cases when I have a student, when they're leaving the organization, when they are being creative to start something fresh, it's always a minimum of 2 years to do that process wisely and successfully. Everyone always thinks lightning striking fast. And it's actually a 2-year process to rebalance that. Give yourself those 2 years, you're going to do great. Try to rush it, try to survive, you'll corrupt your own transformation process, you'll corrupt the very thing you're developing, and then you'll fall between the cracks.
It's like building a house, isn't it? If you don't have the solid quality materials for the foundations of your house, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down.
Yes, and it's not about building what we need 10 years out. It's about building what we need in a few years and evolving it over time to meet what we need 10 years out. The visionaries tend not to make it because what they're envisioning is too far out there. Even today, with lots of opportunity, it's still hard to be a visionary. But there's more room to be a visionary because there's more openings. But we still have to pace it as a leading dragon. We can't go faster than what the support can happen. And with the support being broken apart, we have to be more proactive to bring people together. And we have to be more proactive, not to bring them in too fast, but to bring them in at a paced manner and work with it in a paced manner.
Yeah, and so I just see like the key here, Casey, in your teachings, but since the beginning, right, since we started working together in November 2019, you keep teaching me that the teaching around pace, about pacing yourself, and that is really the key, isn't it? Is just for
Yes.
anything, for sustainable moving forward,
Hmm.
and doing it in that way, in that organic way. Because without pacing, it can't be organic. It's going to fall.
So one of the advantages of pacing is, and working with a lot of these organizations, what you'll find in the old school camp is the greedy individuals, the people who just buy in to support ego and they're for short-term gain. And the thing is, if you try to outpace those individuals, their greed is going to undercut you. They'll get you fired. However, if you're slow and you work around them, they'll get themselves fired because they'll make too many mistakes. And so one of the truths is pacing works on many levels. So even if you're staying in the old growth part of your industry and you are encountering people who are undercutting you for their benefit, you could play a slower game, let them cut themselves out of the picture, and you could still win. And so it still requires a few years, even if you're staying old school. Because the sort out of the business fallout of the changing times will actually cause a lot of people to cut themselves out. A lot of the people who are giving you problems right now as a dragon leader will cut themselves out if you just are able to pace around them.
That's a fascinating concept. Yeah, they cut themselves out. They'll make themselves obsolete and irrelevant and redundant
Yes.
because they will continue by hanging on to the old ways, their way of doing it, their way, and then they'll turn around and it's like, oh, there's no one here. There's nobody left here.
They'll cut themselves out of the picture. And so I help a lot of my students deal with that type of person in those organizations, which we're going to see more and more of those individuals as the times get worse. But if you're careful and you turn your work into a monastic experience and you watch the flow and everything, you could actually dance around those individuals.
Yeah, but what happens? I mean, how patient is patient? I mean, there's so much that you can be patient for. And what happens if you try and do that for a couple of years and that you realize that you're anywhere near where you expected to be, from the start of the process?
Well, there's no cookbook. Everyone's recipe is going to be dependent on where they are, their strength, the timing of what's happening around them, the conditions, the family situation you're in. So for every person, it's a unique combination of how to pace it, quite honestly. So I'm generalizing it. The truth is, though, you have to fit it for each situation in each dynamic. Just because 75% of the time you could outpace the troublemakers, a quarter of the time you can't. And you have to spot those times and leave those times. And so you have to know every situation is unique in this situation. And everyone's looking for cookbooks. They're looking at the self-help books. They're looking through the guru saying, what do I do? And it's not a cookbook. It has to be individualized.
So let's take the pacing, this pacing ability, this key, and let's bring it down to a micro level now, an individual level. And as a conscious dragon leader, I've got to pace myself. So what is it for you, Casey? What does that mean, and why is it so important to? And how do you go about? I would say, how do you go about pacing yourself, given that every single person is different?
Let's look at this. If you're a new dragon leader, you're still in the egg. You're still developing. If you're still in the egg and developing, you don't want to be crushed. You're still fragile. You still need some protection. A lot of people who are becoming dragon leaders are becoming dragon leaders because the old systems already crushed them. Burnout. They're seeing how the system's doing things wrong. So if you're a fresh dragon leader being ejected out from the system, that means going slow. That means self-development and more personal development than you realize. So the qigong, the yoga, the health exercises, the eating better, all of that is as equally important in the beginning stages of being a dragon leader to build that base. And people will not think about that because they think that's personal, but that's part of your development. So for the early dragon leaders, it's a slower pacing. For the dragon leaders who've been ejected or who see the opportunity and they've had a chance to build infrastructure. So it's a question of infrastructure. How much infrastructure do you have supporting you? The more infrastructure you have supporting you, the more and faster you can go. The less infrastructure you have supporting you, the slower and the more you have to build up that infrastructure to leap. On average, 80% of people doing this don't have a lot of infrastructure. If you're a Hispanic woman just being ejected out from your company, you're going to have a lot less infrastructure than if you're a white male, which has the structure of the system supporting you. Very different situation. So you look at the infrastructure, not just your life infrastructure, your social capital, your connections. And so if there's a nice solid base, then you can go faster. If the base you have is an idea and the energy, no, you have to build up first. And if you're in that lower stages, lots of times if you're in lower stages, you will still be in the core business, protecting yourself as you're building your own resources on the side. In other words, a good place to be an egg is actually the old growth area. So again, it depends where you are in the process and depends on infrastructure. And then there's a point where you have enough infrastructure, you can take off like Elon Musk. He's not building SpaceX out of nothing. He has all the money and all the people from PayPal and all the other successful business ventures and all the connections he had. That didn't come out of nowhere. He had this huge infrastructure to build from.
Yeah, so it's really a question of strategizing. Just like taking a snapshot of where you're at today. What's your infrastructure? Who are the communities around you? What's the support that you've got? How long for? And the rest, and basically taking a snapshot of your landscape, your personal landscape, and going, can I jump now? And where am I going to be jumping to? Or do I still need to build it up more, cushion it up a bit more?
Yeah. And you could do tests along the way. As you build up your infrastructure, you could do little tests and produce little products or sites or information streams and see how well they're received. Initially, we're going to be small streams, since that means it's not time to push out. But as the streams get bigger, oh, I could do more. And so you could push out more.
Yeah, and inside organizations on a senior management level, I can see that one important piece of the infrastructure is influential skills. Your influence. How much of influence do you have as a senior manager to the board, for instance? How well are you respected, connected? How often do you go and play golf? I mean, God, yeah, golf or lunch or whatever it is, or drinks after work. How and even that, there are lots of traps in there.
Yes. 3 pieces: integrity, reputation, and connections. Most people use connection, the golfing, the lunches, that's connection. But you need reputation and integrity also.
So what does integrity look like?
Integrity is being true to who you are and being true to be able to follow through with what you say. Being a young dragon, it's easy to say a lot, but since you don't have infrastructure, you can't follow through with what you say. So integrity is being able to follow through with consistency and through with something that you see and say.
So you said the 3 things were connection, integrity, and reputation.
They're all interconnected. But most people try to do it through just the connections, just through the, your network. Network is one of them, but network isn't as strong as people think it is without the reputation and without the integrity to back it up. I can tell you a lot of people with a big network, but they have no integrity and their reputation sucks. And you wouldn't go do business with them because their reputation precedes them. Just because they have a big network doesn't mean you want to work with them.
Definitely.
There are a lot of sharks out there who would take advantage of you.
Definitely. But then how can you recognize those with integrity versus those without integrity?
Experience. And also, again, consistency, action. Do their actions follow their words?
Yeah, yeah,
Now, talking to the community, is it consistent?
yeah. Wow.
No,
Okay.
you can. It's not a simple thing, but it's there.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to remember those three.
So today was a good food for thought session.
Yeah, definitely. No, it was great. And those are like, I mean, could you say those are three pillars to your infrastructure inside an organization? So integrity, connection,
I would say so.
and reputation.
And reputation. Hmm.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you're a good programmer, but you are not known as a good programmer, you don't have a reputation. Without that reputation, there's no infrastructure to support you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that takes me back to my days when I was working at CERN, the European Centre for Nuclear Research, and I was one of the senior buyers for the new Large Hadron Collider, the new particle accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to hunker down quite a bit. I used to just do my work and just get on, and it was a fascinating project. And one day my line manager comes into my office and he goes, you know, Deborah, you work too much. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? I don't understand. And he goes, you don't hang out at the coffee machine enough. And I'm like, well, no, I've got work to do. You know, I got stuff to do. We got these deadlines. You know, we got this project. And he's like, no, you don't understand. So I didn't have the reputation of being, and I was one of the best negotiators because I set it through claims management on the back of signed contracts. I defended CERN's interests and I saved them hundreds of thousands of euros through negotiating post-signed contracts. But people would only hear it through a bit like the grapevine. But I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me. And he's like, if you want to build your reputation, you need to get out there at the water cooler. You need to be out in the corridors. You need to be lunching more with the rest of the team. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a waste of time.
And think about right now, as the system is collapsing, as problems are unfolding, the time to build reputation isn't when the forest is all replanted and all regrown, because it's too late. You're going to be lost in that forest. The time to make your reputation, the time to show your integrity, is actually when things are coming down and you stand up to show who you are. This is an opportunity, which is a golden opportunity for the next 5 years for dragon leaders to make their name.
Yeah,
it's a once in a lifetime experience, quite honestly, that we're being presented. I don't see this as bad times. I see it as a time of opportunity, a lot of good hope, a lot of good work to be done if we do it.
Chaos and opportunity. And that brings me, it's like we've done like a full circle, because this is exact what you're just saying about it's now in this time of chaos that we need to be building our reputation and standing up for in our integrity and building our reputation and building our bridges. So over to our dragon listeners, new beginnings. What is it that you can start doing differently than yesterday, where you can start building on your reputation and perhaps outside of your organization?
And take 2 to 3 years to do it. You have the time. Don't rush. Take the 2 to 3 years to truly build it, because then you'll be golden. If you rush it, you'll burn out. Take the opportunity to expand into this time. It's there.
If you rush it, you'll burn out. So pace yourself.
Pace yourself and build so you can evolve with the changes.
Yeah, that's great. Casey, thank you so much. It's always
Mahalo. Honor to be here.
until next time.